Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Coming up this week, Google's VP of Search explains how AI is transforming their business model, a new tool you can use that describes itself as what Apple Intelligence really should have been, a new study that shows us how we're really using AI with some surprising results, and all of the rumors surrounding OpenAI's secret new product. So stay tuned for all of that and more, and if you enjoy the briefing, hit the subscribe and the like button. So first up, Anthropic has launched a new Claude research feature that allows it to connect directly to Google Workspace and perform a series of agentic searches. One of the examples shown as part of this announcement is a prompt asking Claude to prepare an out-of-office handover plan for a 3-month sabbatical, which searches through all of your email threads, calendar events, and Google Drive to create a personalized itinerary that includes check-ins with colleagues. Claude says this isn't the only use case that it can be used for, and that Claude research can also be used by product and engineering teams for things like API documentation and system design. So if you're somebody who uses both Google Workspace and Claude, then that's something definitely worth checking out. And speaking of search, Netflix is testing out a new AI-powered search engine for movies and TV. It's powered by OpenAI, and it allows users to search for content by inputting specific queries, including natural language descriptions of their mood or preferences. So for example, you could say, find me something uplifting or find me a funny movie that's about friends. Netflix says that this is designed to understand emotional tones and nuanced requests, which make recommendations more tailored. And speaking of OpenAI, in other news this week, ChatGPT has announced that it will now remember your previous conversations, if, of course, you want it to. Saved memories are specific details that users can explicitly instruct ChatGPT to remember, or details that it will automatically identify as useful for future interactions. So for example, you might say, remember that I am a vegetarian when recommending recipes, or ChatGPT might save a detail like your preference for Python when you're coding. The feature is optional, and it's available to users outside of Europe at the moment. But this week, there are also rumors that following the success of ChatGPT's image generation feature that went viral, the company is apparently in the early stages of building a social network to rival X. Now, last week, it was announced in a TED Talk with Sam Altman that the company has now crossed the 1 billion user mark, which of course is impressive. But the thinking here is rumored to be centered on X's ability to use its own user-generated posts to train its model. So if you think about it, in the absence of first-party training data, ChatGPT is still reliant on third parties to some extent. So the idea would be that ChatGPT could start to build out some social features of its own and use that data to train its models. And as OpenAI looks to be more like X, Grok has released its own interpretation of ChatGPT's canvas called Studio. If you ask Grok to write code or a document for you, it will now preview it in a side panel, just as it does in ChatGPT or Claude. Now, I've used this week, and I'm actually not a massive fan of this UI pattern. I find it a little bit jarring when you input a prompt and then this side panel pops up on the right-hand side and splits the screen automatically. For me, it's a little bit jarring. I much prefer the original experience. So I'm not quite sure why Grok is copying ChatGPT and Claude. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. It was also announced this week that Grok has also launched its own memory feature. And so this ongoing battle between OpenAI and ChatGPT was neatly summed up in this visual, which represents this as a game of checkers between Elon Musk and Sam Altman. But this does raise a wider question here, which is, can AI products actually differentiate themselves? In this feature matrix, you can see that pretty much all of the different AI products now have the same features. So things like Canvas, deep research, reasoning models, the ability to generate images, voice mode, and so on. Each week, as one company releases one feature, it seems like all the other companies then play catch up. And this seems to be symptomatic of the core problem that many of these major AI companies face, which is, how do you differentiate these products that can essentially do everything? Companies like Google and Microsoft with genuine product applications built on top of these models seem to be best placed for building differentiated offerings. And on the topic of Google, this week, its VP of Search gave us an insight into how she views the future of AI search following the launch of Google's new AI mode. So in this interview with the FT, Google's VP of Search, Elizabeth Reed, explains how AI is transforming its core business. Some of the key insights include some strategic decisions that the company has made, including the fact that Google isn't aiming to build a chatbot friend like ChatGPT, and that search remains information first, not conversational. She says that people are now asking longer, more nuanced questions, and that the future of search will become more personalized and multimodal, combining text, images, video, and voice, and that AI-powered search will include ads placed contextually before, after, or even inside AI overviews, plus a paid version of AI mode hasn't been ruled out just yet. So it seems like moves by Perplexity and other companies to introduce paid versions of search seems to be influencing Google's strategy here. And speaking of Google, last week they unveiled a bunch of new product releases in their annual conference. And over on Substack this week, I've spent some time unpacking some of the most helpful announcements that are worth knowing about in a work setting. And one of these is this AI agent that is trained to help you to come up with some new ideas. So this AI ideation agent lets you give it some requirements or problems that you want it to work on. And then once these requirements are finalized, the agent employs hundreds of AI sub-agents that produce a large volume of ideas, which is typically around 100 to 200 in just a few minutes. It then uses a tournament-style system which ranks each idea based on user-defined criteria like feasibility, originality, or impact. And then this ultimately results in a prioritized list from highest to lowest rank. So if you're interested in how you might be able to apply some of Google's announcements, then take a look at this knowledge series. And also on Substack this week, I take a look at how AI agents are used in practice. This includes real-world examples from over 20 companies, including new AI agent features from companies like Adobe, HubSpot, Visa, Replit, and others, as well as new AI agent startups and SDKs that have recently been released for product teams to build their own AI agent features. So if you are feeling a little bit fatigued by AI agents, but you still want to stay in the loop, then check out that over on Substack. Now let's take a look at some tools you can use this week. So first up is a tool that describes itself as what Apple Intelligence should have been. This is called TabTabTab, which is certainly a unique name. And the way this works is it essentially transforms your copy and paste logic by overlaying AI into that process and allowing you to do things like convert Google Maps searches into a spreadsheet, generate invites for your team on Slack, and also create product research. So if you're looking for interesting ways to augment your copy and paste functionality on a Mac, then check out TabTabTab. Next is a tool called Product Rank. And as we know, AI is eating into SEO traffic. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to understand where your product ranks in top AI product rankings. So for example, you could put in API aggregator and then it'll show you the top products that are ranked across the top models, including ChatGPT, Perplexity, and Claude. So if you've currently taken a bit of a hit on SEO traffic and you're looking to improve your performance across some of the AI models, then AI product rankings is definitely a product worth checking out. And the final product is something called LifeStack, which takes a slightly different approach to calendar management. So rather than just taking all of your to-do lists and then mapping them onto your calendar, this allows you to manage your calendar according to your energy levels. Now, different people have different energy levels throughout the day, and this allows you to take the tasks that you've got to do during that day and then map them to an appropriate time of the day where your energy levels reflect that task. So if you're somebody who likes to experiment with new types of calendars and managing your own time according to energy levels, then check out LifeStack. Now let's take a look at some product data and trends from this week. And the first piece of data is this, which is that social networks aren't particularly social anymore. So new data published by Meta shows that just 17% of viewing time on Facebook and 7% of viewing time on Instagram is now spent viewing content posted by friends, and the trend is continuing downwards. So you can see in this graph that in a comparison between 2023 and 2025, the average amount of time spent watching friends' content on these social networks has dropped significantly. Now, this data has been made public as part of an antitrust trial against Meta, which also shows just how much Instagram has to gain from a potential TikTok ban. So you can see here these two spikes in traffic correlate exactly to when the TikTok ban was enforced earlier this year. So if you'd like to keep up to date with how social networks are changing, then that lawsuit is definitely throwing up some interesting pieces of data which are worth keeping on top of. Other data this week shows that therapy and companionship are now the #1 use cases for how people are using generative AI. So this is a study that was published in Harvard Business Review this week, which compares how people are using generative AI in 2025 versus 2024. And you can see that generating ideas has actually dropped from first place in 2024 down to 6th place in 2025, with therapy and companionship now jumping from 2nd into 1st place. This is the data visualization that's included in Harvard Business Review, but the actual study itself is also very interesting reading. So it goes through the top 100 use cases with a lot more information about each of those. And the top 100 includes other use cases, including getting tax advice, writing appraisals for colleagues at work, and even speaking to the deceased. So if you're interested in learning more about how people are actually using AI, then check out that report. Other data this week shows that 20% of all Salesforce's code is now generated by AI agents, according to a senior VP who works at the company. Now, this is impressive, but Anthropic's CEO predicted earlier this year that within 6 months, 90% of all code would be written by AI. So there's still some way to go. Another report worth taking a look at this week is the 2025 State of Design and Make report. And in this report, it says that 46% of design leaders say the ability to work with or implement AI is now their top hiring priority. This report contains a lot of other information regarding the design industry. So if you're interested in keeping on top of that to understand how AI is impacting things like sustainability, hiring decisions, and training within the industry, then check out that report. And in other news, AI model funding has dropped 30% in China during the first quarter of this year. So this drop was accelerated by the adoption of DeepSeek, which has shifted the focus of investors away from model development and towards product development on top of those models. So that is a trend that we're increasingly starting to see, where the focus shifts away from the models themselves and to the products that are being built on top of those. So this is an interesting stat coming out of China. And in terms of new trends this week, a new product is hoping to kickstart a new and well-intentioned but slightly disturbing trend, which is using AI to contact elderly relatives who may be lonely and lacking mental stimulation. So this is a new product that is called In Touch, and it's designed for people who want to stay in touch with elderly relatives who may not get to speak to many people throughout the day. And it works by creating an AI-generated telephone call that has a conversation with that elderly person. So this may be somebody who just lives on their own or somebody who has dementia. So this is a pretty noble way of using AI, but there is something slightly dystopian about that. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below on that. And finally, Google has created a new AI model for a unique use case that could transform the natural world, and that is the ability to speak to dolphins. Dolphins are generally regarded as some of the smartest creatures on the planet, but we've never fully been able to understand how they communicate with one another. Google has developed this model called Dolphin Gemma, which allows us to decode dolphin communication. The dolphin model uses a Google-developed audio technology called SoundStream to tokenize dolphins' vocalizations and allowing these sounds to be fed into the model as they're recorded. Now, in the short term, nobody is expecting Dolphin Gemma to allow us to be able to speak directly to dolphins. But as the technology becomes more sophisticated over time, we could see AI be used not just for communicating with elderly relatives, but also our friends in the ocean. And with that, I'll leave it there. Thanks very much for listening and watching. I'll be back next week with another briefing.